Gaza is in the grip of a worst humanitarian crisis in modern history. After nearly 2 years of war, we've seen reports that entire neighborhoods have been reduced to rubble. We've also seen reports that basic services like food, water, and healthcare have all but collapsed. And aid agencies have warned that this is a man-made crisis due to Israel's relentless bombardment and restrictions of essential supplies. To help us understand the reality on the ground and the scale of the challenges and what can still be done, we're joined by Juliette Touma, Director of Communications for UNRWA, agency that provides relief and protection to Palestinians. Thank you so much, Juliette, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and great to be with you. It's a very good question. I'm not sure we have the right words anymore to describe what is happening to the Palestinian people in Gaza, to the mothers, to the children, to the fathers, to older people, to little babies. It's going from very, very bad to worse by the hour. And we've used every possible term to describe what is happening to people in Gaza for nearly 2 years now. UNRWA has played a critical role in raising the flag, in relaying the voice of the Palestinian people, their plight, including our own staff. But it seems it has fallen on deaf ears because nothing is changing on the ground. The only change that we are seeing, that people are seeing, is that things keep getting worse and worse. Just recently, we have recorded very high levels of malnutrition among children, especially in Gaza City, where 1 in 5 children is malnourished. And when I say very high, this is very high in the context of Gaza. Before the war, malnutrition was not existent in the Gaza Strip. So things have very, very fast gotten to the rock bottom. Multiple displacement. People are forced to look for safety. Safety doesn't exist. No place is safe in Gaza, and no one is safe, and no one has been spared since the war began. Doctors, other medical workers, journalists, aid workers, including our colleagues at UNRWA. Nearly 350 colleagues have been killed since the war began. The protection for United Nations facilities has been non-existent pretty much since early on. And we know that because several of our shelters, United Nations shelters run by UNRWA, they've been hit, and a number of people, hundreds of people, in fact, who were taking shelter in those United Nations buildings were killed.
So, many agencies have warned that over 500,000 people are facing catastrophic hunger. And they also say that this is a crisis that is avoidable. And at the same time, agencies are also reporting that only a fraction of the daily trucks that are needed are entering Gaza, and Israel's inspections and closures and long backlogs. Al Jazeera and Reuters also posted footages of food and aid being spoiled at warehouses and roads. How directly are Israeli policies, including the blockade and restrictions at the crossings, driving this famine? And what does that mean for the civilians that you're trying to serve?
So there's a siege on the Gaza Strip that has been imposed for more than 5 months now, since 2nd of March. And for an agency like UNRWA, which is the largest humanitarian organization in Gaza, we have been banned from bringing in food, medicine, hygiene supplies, medical supplies to the communities in Gaza. It's been more than 5 months now for us. Banning the largest humanitarian agency from bringing in the worth of around 6,000 trucks that continue to be stuck in places like Jordan, where I am today, and in places like Egypt. That's a decision, that's a political decision. And that's what needs to change. The siege must be lifted, and for that you need political will. For UNRWA to drive those trucks into Gaza, for other United Nations agencies, for other humanitarian agencies. We're not the only ones banned from entering our supplies to Gaza. There's other organizations. So all these organizations must be allowed to enter Gaza with their supplies and distribute it to people in need. Gaza needs, on average, at least 500 to 600 trucks of basics. Doesn't just include food, also includes water. It includes fuel for humanitarian purposes. It includes hygiene supplies, basic things like hand soap, like shampoo, like sanitary pads for women and girls, like diapers for babies and older people. It needs medicines, medical supplies for the medical facilities. It basically needs everything that a human being needs. And it's been largely deprived of that. There's been a lot of focus on food, understandably, but even that, what is coming in is either not enough, or it's been done through the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is an organization that is colluded with mercenaries, that is supported by the government of the United States and Israel. And that format of so-called aid delivery is taking more lives than saving lives, because according to the UN, just under 1,400 people have been killed while they're trying to seek food assistance, mainly through this a system that was put in place, the so-called GHF.
So I was reading a report, and around 800 people, if, like, correct me if I'm wrong, of UNRWA staff has been killed so far in Israeli strikes. How is UNRWA adapting, in the face of these bans and repeated attacks, and what assurances, if any, have been given to, aid organizations from maybe the United States, maybe the EU or the UK or France?
So in terms of UNRWA workers, we have verified that nearly 350 of our colleagues have been killed throughout the Gaza Strip since the war began. Several of them have been killed in the line of duty while providing services and humanitarian assistance to their communities. And what also happened is close to 800 people were killed while they were taking shelter in UNRWA facilities. So we're talking about two violations here. It goes back to what I said in the beginning, that no one is safe, no place is safe, no one has been spared, no place has been spared, that hospitals have been hit, schools have been hit, and shelters have been hit, medical facilities, United Nations warehouses, you name it. Every single red line has been crossed in this war. And what needs to happen is when we have a ceasefire, and hopefully that will be soon, is there needs to be independent investigations into all of these violations, because all these violations are critical. Those who have committed those violations must be held accountable. And it is critical that this is done in the context of Gaza, because if it's not done in the context of Gaza, it might create a precedent, and we will have those violations happening with impunity in other conflicts and other settings, either those that are happening right now or those that might emerge in the future. So we gotta investigate and hold those responsible, regardless of who they are, whichever party to the conflict they are. We gotta hold them accountable if the world is interested in protecting international humanitarian law.
Okay, so humanitarian aid groups have accused Israel of using aid as a leverage by imposing complex rules and selectively, allowing shipments through, and also banning organizations like UNRWA and only allowing Gaza, humanitarian fund to conduct airdrop. How would you describe these restrictions and delays? And do you think these amount to using all of this that is happening amounts to, using food and humanitarian relief as a weapon of war? Like you said, there's a precedent being set. And if we ignore, or if we ignore to even acknowledge that these are war crimes, then where does this lead us?
So food has definitely been used as a weapon of war, and so has humanitarian assistance. That is something for legal experts to decide what this accounts for. What we care about in UNRWA is to be able to deliver humanitarian assistance. And we haven't been able to deliver humanitarian assistance for more than 5 months now. Our teams on the ground in Gaza, we have a great a group of staff members who are very dedicated to humanitarian relief and assistance and services, over 10,000 people who continue to work in Gaza. They themselves are knackered, absolutely exhausted. They're very, very hungry. They're struggling to get food. And these are people who get salaries. UNRWA continue to pay salaries to people in Gaza, to our frontline workers in Gaza. But even those who have a little bit of money, they can't afford the high prices, or the commodities that they're seeking are unavailable. Let's look at what needs to happen and happen right away. As for the gates of Gaza to open, and those who control the gates are the Israeli authorities, so they need to open those gates. They need to allow UNRWA and other humanitarian organizations, including the NGOs and other UN agencies, to drive in aid and at scale. 500, 600 trucks a day is the minimum that we estimate that Gaza needs. Maybe it needs even more. And that's the only way that lives can be saved. And that's the only way that famine can be averted. Because in some parts of Gaza, one could argue that there is already famine. People are dying of hunger and of starvation. So if we want to control that, if we want to save lives, if we want to save our humanity, whatever is left of our humanity, all we're asking for is let us do our job.
So you mentioned that we need about 500 trucks to be going into Gaza right now. How many are going at the moment?
Not much, certainly zero for UNRWA. And we are, like I said, the largest humanitarian organization. This morning, a group of NGOs, over 100 NGOs, said that the vast majority of them working in Gaza are not allowed to bring anything. They haven't been able to bring anything. We're talking about very big NGOs who do very good work and who have a lot of supplies. And all of this amounts to millions of dollars in donor money, by the way. So the food, the medicine, the hygiene supplies, they're all waiting outside. We are ready. We're just waiting for the green light. And meanwhile, just a couple of kilometers away, people in Gaza are starving totally unnecessarily when we can reach them with aid. I don't know where anywhere in the world this has happened, when the humanitarians' hands are tied as much as ours are right now, when we are banned from delivering to 2 million people who are hungry and starving and very, very thirsty because the region has been going through a heat wave. The record high temperatures have been witnessed over the past few days. So people are dehydrated, they are fainting, and we're not allowed to help them. We are not allowed to do our jobs. Where in the world has this ever happened? Where?
No, yeah. So when the aid does come into Gaza, how is it distributed? Other than the GHF site, a normal person in Gaza, how would they have access to aid when it does come in?
So very many people are resorting to the lethal routes, and that's to go to GHF. And GHF has only 4 distribution centers. We don't know the hours that they operate. It's not fixed hours. Those hours and the times of operations, they are never communicated to the communities. So people just predict, or it's a word of mouth, or it's rumor, or it's disinformation, misinformation, all of that is spreading. And people have to walk for miles on end under very, very high temperature, as one example this week, not knowing whether they'll be able to pick up very, very little food, but more importantly, not knowing whether they'll be able to survive this journey. Because like I said in the beginning, just under 1,400 people were killed while they were trying to seek aid, primarily through these GHF facilities. So, and DHF excluding to the vast majority of the community, because older women and older men, the injured, people with disabilities, women in general, children, they can't make that journey to go south, where it is a whole bombed out area, by the way, to go south, do this journey, carry the heavy stuff whenever they're lucky to have that, and go all the way back. And I saw a video yesterday of this little boy. He was barely 4 or 5 years old, and he carried a bag of wheat, probably heavier than his weight. And he was carrying a little knife with him. And that
Yeah.
boy was interviewed by a guy, and the guy said to him, Uncle, why do you have a knife with you? And he's like, because I'm going to use the knife to, if anyone comes and steals my wheat flour. It's a child. What is
4 year old.
happening to humanity? It's just,
And to think that just a few kilometers away, there is food and aid that is just there and it's not being allowed to come in.
no, a few kilometers away, the reality is as following. There's electricity 24/7. There's ACs for people to cool them down because of the heat wave. There's supermarkets and shops loaded with anything you need. There is water, including cold water. There is safety, and
Yeah.
that's just a couple of kilometers away from Gaza.
So, I want to ask, you mentioned that there is, there are aid trucks waiting at the border to cross it. So what happens to the aid when it is not let in? Where does it go? Is it wasted? Where does it go?
I'll tell you about our aid at UNRWA. We don't have anything at the borders. We have them in Jordan and in Egypt, and they're all in warehouses. But there's only much you can do because, for example, food has expiry dates, medicine has expiry dates. So the longer these supplies wait, the closer we are to the expiry dates. And so eventually, if they're not going to be allowed in, yes, we'll have to dispose of this aid. We shouldn't ever be doing as humanitarians because we work very, very hard to get that aid, to buy that aid, to bring that aid, to deliver that aid, to put it in the warehouse, to wait so that it goes into Gaza. And it costs a lot of money. And I will not never have the words to describe what would that mean?
There are footages coming out of Gaza as well that some of the aid that is being airdropped or, being given at GHS drop sites, they're expired. Do you know about, that is what is happening, that the Gaza people are getting expired food, expired aid?
I haven't heard these reports. What I do know is that airdrops are unnecessary. Airdrops are very, very expensive. In humanitarian settings, we use airdrops as a last resort when you don't have any other alternative. In the context of Gaza, there is an alternative, and that's the road crossings and several road crossings that can be opened if there is a political will. And then trucks in their thousands can drive through if there is the political will. So you don't need airdrops, which are very, very expensive, which are inefficient, which you actually don't know, you can't control where the aid goes, and which can also be very dangerous for people because, I mean, we've had also in Gaza, this round and the previous rounds, we've had people killed because of airdrops.
25 foreign ministers recently called for a flood of aid into Gaza, but little has changed on the ground. The UN has warned that political statements aren't translating into actual relief. And human rights groups have also, they've been calling for investigations into Israel's conduct under the international humanitarian law. Why isn't this diplomatic pressure working? And it's almost as if it's falling on deaf ears. And what do you think it would take for Israel to actually open the flow of aid that at the scale that it is needed?
I wish I had an answer to this question. I really wish I had an answer to this question. What I do know is that it is time for action. What I do know is that all these statements are, of course, very welcome and much needed, and sometimes it's too little, too late. I also know that words do not feed hungry children, and what needs to happen is for the gates of Gaza to finally open by the Israeli authorities so that humanitarian agencies can drive their aid through. It's about our collective and global humanity, and the clock is ticking.
According to the Gaza media office, more than 230 journalists have been killed in Israeli attacks since the war began, including Al Jazeera's staff. And the journalists have been attacked and targeted when they were in clearly marked press vehicles or press jackets. How does this unprecedented killing of journalists affect the world's ability to see and understand what's happening in Gaza? And Is there any way, organizations like UNRWA or UN or other NGOs can compensate for that loss of independent reporting from Gaza?
It's the place that had the highest number of journalists killed, Gaza, in such a very short time. It's about killing the voice, silencing the voice, silencing the truth, and targeting journalists is a crime. It's also coupled with a ban on international media going into Gaza and reporting independently from inside Gaza. And the international media has been banned from going into Gaza for nearly 2 years now. And with that, there is a huge disinformation and misinformation campaign, largely against the Palestinian people in Gaza, which dehumanizes the Palestinian people. And then there is these campaigns against any organization and anybody that speaks to what is happening in Gaza, to the atrocities that are happening in Gaza.
Thank you so much, Juliette, for joining us and for giving us a stark account of the realities facing Gaza for decisive action.
I would like to thank you very much for your interest and for your patience, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you. Thank you so much.